booktube, it's Kelly. Thank you so much for watching my channel, Books I'm Not Reading. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Reviews, after all this time, still remain the most challenging videos for me to make, but in this case, I felt it was necessary because I have spent almost the entire month of January reading Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak and watching the stunning 1965 film adaptation by David Lean starring a very handsome Omar Sharif and an absolutely gorgeous Julie Christie. And I did this as a buddy read with Courtney Ferreter, and thank you, Courtney, because if it were not for her, I would have never been able to finish this book. So I have some notes, so I'll be looking down here, but it's to try to keep me on track and to keep this video tight and concise. So here we go. Now, just because I did not like this book does not mean that you might not like this book. So I'm not gonna give any spoilers away, but I just want to kind of give you like my 5 big problems with the book. And some of them relate a little bit to the film. We'll tie the film in a little tiny bit. But okay, so number 1, is this a novel or is this a novel of ideas? And I think those are very different things. And I struggle with the novel of ideas. And you could argue, I suppose, that every novel is a novel of ideas, but Dr. Zhivago contains long, winding passages about philosophy, and I couldn't follow the thread of it. At times I couldn't tell who was talking, and it's really between Dr. Zhivago and his friends for the most part. But yeah, it's very, very confusing. And especially when you're like me, I haven't read a whole lot of Russian literature, so even just some of the political changes in the country, like I'm not totally confident about like what exactly is happening, what time we're in, that sort of thing. So if this were just a love story, I don't think that Pasternak would have had so much trouble getting it published. This book had to be smuggled out of Russia multiple times and given to multiple publishers, and finally an Italian publisher took it up, and I believe it was published for the first time in 1957. It was not translated into English until 1958. And yeah, so if it, like I said, I think it has more to do with the politics of the time than a romance, and that's why I feel like it's more of a novel of ideas. Second, there are way too many characters in Dr. Zhivago. I believe I read somewhere that there's more than 200 characters in Dr. Zhivago, and I will tell you straight up, I think half of them could easily go. And nothing will be lost, nothing. Sometimes you are introduced to a character and then you don't see them again for maybe 100 pages. I mean, it could be a long gap, and then you're trying to remember, like you're trying to go back in your head, and sometimes I just couldn't. I couldn't remember where that character had appeared before, which was maddening, and you know, there's not like an index of when certain characters appear, so it was just really frustrating, and I really felt like just so unnecessary, because there clearly are a central core cast of characters, and I wish Pasternak had just stuck with them. But number 3, so on some level though, right, like there is a love story in this book. I think the film has maybe altered some of our views about the book, because we think of it as a love story. When I was watching the movie last night, I just threw my hands up in the air. Right in the very opening scene, there's the mention of this collection of poetry that the main character, Yuri Zhivago, has published called, it's not clear in the film whether it was published posthumously or during his life, but the Lara poems. Okay, there's no such mention of anything like that in this book. Lara, I would say, is not a major character. I mean, she's still a really important character in this book, but it is about Dr. Zhivago. It is not about Lara. And I think the book suffers for that. And also, you know, they've kind of had there's lots of chance encounters in the book, and there's a scene in the book that is completely flipped on its head. It's 180 degrees turned around in the film. So I think that could be one of the reasons why, because it's still, you know, the actions, Laura's ironing, and you know, Yuri's trying to tell her, I think he's trying to tell her, like, oh, like, I hope you don't think there's anything between us, that sort of thing. And then the next thing you know, I mean, some time passes again, but like, yeah, I mean, there's a scene where it just seems like it's a very simple, like, just reintroducing themselves to each other, and then, oh, he spends the night. Like, so there's just not the kind of romance, like, we don't get to see them falling in love in the book, or I don't think in the film either. That's my opinion. You can please tell me if you love Dr. Zhivago. I want to hear all about it in the comments section. So, but I just wish that there had been more before, you know, they actually get together, like something, like some kind of scene where we see why Zhivago is falling in love with Lara, or vice versa. Like, there just needed to be something. There are some scenes and some really beautiful passages of writing from Zhivago about Lara later in the book, but both Courtney and I felt like it was too little and way too late in the book for those to be appearing. Number 4. So at the end of this 550 some page book, there's a poetry collection. And I just have to say that trying to read a poetry collection at the end of all of that, in a very dense book, I found really challenging. I found it hard to figure out, when was he writing them, why, you know, what point of his life did he write certain poems, that sort of thing. And I wish that they had been interspersed throughout the book. I think that would have helped the novel, and then I also think it would have been just so much easier when we get to the end of the book, because there's not only a conclusion to this book, there's also an epilogue and then a poetry collection. So it just feels like we're ending, and then we're ending, and then another thing. So yeah. Number 5. There is very little reference to what year it is, how long people are in a certain place, and that I found confusing as well, because I'm trying to like match it up to world events, and I really, really struggled with that in this book of like, okay, I think this is World War I, and oh, I think this is this, and there's no mention of, you know, the political leaders in Russia in the book. The film does that. The film does mention Lenin. Yeah, that could totally be on me. I have not read very much Russian literature, and I'm not as familiar with Russian history maybe as I need to be to read this book. I did read online, and part of me is hoping that this isn't true, that this book is taught in Russia now. It was banned for a long time, but this book is taught in Russia now in like for 11th graders. I can't even imagine. I can't fathom that. So I'm sure it's a completely different experience when it's your own country, and, you know, events that have shaped your country and what they look like to someone who was living there. But yeah, it was it was really hard to follow. Like, were they in this place for a long time, or was it just a couple weeks? I mean, that's how vast the difference is. So I will say, on the other hand, like, in defense, so just a couple positive things. There are some really, really beautiful passages of writing in the book. I don't think the poetry is in the poetry part of the book. I think the poetry is actually in the novel. I think the best writing is in the novel and not the poetry. Although I understand that Pasternak's poetry is more popular in Russia than maybe it's because everyone had to read this in 11th grade. I don't know. And I will also say that, in spite of, again, like, the film really changing things around, sometimes for the good, and but there are just some absolutely breathtaking moments of scenery. Jason told me before we started watching the movie that David Lean loves trains, and I was like, well, this is the perfect book for him to make a film about, because there are a lot of trains in this book. So yes, that made a fair amount of sense to me, that David Lean, if he was into trains, would be drawn to this, because I play an important part in getting to places. So the film did win 5 Oscars: adapted screenplay, color cinematography, art direction, costume design, and best score. And if I can find, like, a worthwhile trailer online, I will link to that down below. But if you've read Dr. Zhivago and you love it, please feel free to share that with me. If you didn't love it, you can tell me some of your problems with the book. We haven't even addressed adultery, so we won't go into that though right now. Or if you've only seen the film, and what you thought of the film as well. So I would love to hear from you down below in the comment section. BookTube, remember to be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.